Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan MCNAMARA. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Cubine and welcome to our very first episode of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign, where we'll take you on a guided tour of all things classic cinema and share great stories of old Hollywood. From Beneath the Hollywood Sign started as a blog about 5 years ago, and now we're hitting the airwaves. We're greatly enhanced by my lovely co-host, Nan McNamara. Hi, Nan.
Hey, Steve. I have enjoyed your blog all these years, and I'm so excited to get to talk about it and let everybody else know about all the wonderful stories and details that they may not know about some of their favorite film stars and all things old Hollywood.
Well, we're going to have fun and we're going to tell some really great stories. I do know that.
And a big shout out and thank you to Kat and JG of the Box of Oddities podcast, as well as a big welcome to the Box of Oddities freaks and the Shallow End podcast swimmers. Welcome, everyone. I just want to let people know a little bit more about you, since I've known you for 20 years.
At least.
Not only are you the savant, as I call you, of all things old Hollywood, but you have quite a pedigree yourself in terms of your writing, your producing. You are an Emmy Award-winning producer of the series Break a Hip. You are a member of the Directors Guild of America, as well as the Television Academy. You have worked with some amazing actors, including Bonnie Bedelia, Beau Bridges, Delta Burke, Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, Olivia.
As well as Allison Janney and Cheryl Hines and so many others. You've also written a novel. Is there nothing you cannot do?
Well, you know, you bring your own special insights to this show too, and I'm very excited to be working with you on this. I mean, for those who don't know, and you should know, Nan is a multiple award-winning actress of film, TV, and theater. You've probably seen her in everything from Hawaii Five-0 to Lone Star 911 to Good Trouble. She's also an accomplished writer, director, and has voiced hundreds of radio and television commercials and nearly 300 audiobooks.
Well, I think we're going to make a great team.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited, and I'm especially excited to dive into today's subject. You are going to be our true resource because you really dive into specifics that most people won't know about. So I'm excited to start this podcast, episode 1, Oscar Fumbles.
Yes, and there's been many.
And there's been many. I love what you say, that for cinephiles, the Oscars are...
It's our Super Bowl. We all know it. It's our Super Bowl.
Yeah. And we sort of, even after it's over the next day, we're sort of still thinking about,
oh, the water cooler talk afterward is epic.
Exactly, exactly. So tell me just a couple examples off the top of your head where Oscar got it right, in your opinion.
Well, you know, it's funny because everybody knows the Oscars are subjective. You know, everybody has an opinion and there's no, who knows? It's so subjective. But when they get it right, it is like poetry. For example, when they gave Harold Russell the Best Supporting Actor nomination for The Best Years of Our Lives, when they'd already planned to give him an honorary Oscar because of his duty and his service to the war and what he brought to cinema, but then he won one competitively, that was just the apex of perfect.
Yeah.
And then also Geraldine Page winning for The Trip to Bountiful. I mean, was there ever a more deserving performance? I don't think so.
She's an amazing actress, and she could have ended up one of those people that never won, and is a you know, such a star.
Like Barbara Stanwyck, Irene Dunne, Myrna Loy, Cary Grant. I mean, the people that didn't win.
Exactly.
The list is almost as impressive as the people who won.
Yeah, it's true. I think what we really will have fun talking about, though, is where Oscar got it wrong. And I have a few myself.
Good.
I was so intrigued by your list. So let's start with the little bird.
The little bird. Well, and it's my pet peeve of all times, probably with the Oscars. And I know there's people that are going to so disagree. We'll get letters on this one. We'll get emails.
Yeah.
But just the fact that the Academy gave 2 Oscars to Louise Rainer just chaps my butt.
Yeah. And most people may not even know who Louise Rainer is.
Yes.
So tell us, let's talk about the 2 performances that gave her 2 beautiful Oscars.
Well, a little background on her. She was a German-born, Austrian-raised actress that Louis B. Mayer found on a talent scout when he went to Europe, and he saw her in a play, and he decided she was going to be the next big thing at MGM. Because he was looking for the new Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, that exotic type. And so he, for whatever reasons that only Louis B. Mayer and God know, he decided it was Louise Rainer. So he brought her to MGM, put her under contract. Literally, she could barely speak English, so he got her, diction lessons. He threw her in 8 movies in 2 years, and she won 2 Oscars. Well, greatly because of his power and his influence, he basically, I think, made those happen for her.
Right.
Which, unfortunate, because when you look at the first Oscar she won, it was The Great Ziegfeld, which she won for Best Actress. It was a supporting role, if anything. It really should have been a Best Supporting nomination, but Louis B. Mayer, with his infinite power, pushed it into the lead actress category. The other nominees were phenomenal. I mean, she beat out Irene Dunne for Theodora Goes Wild.
Wow.
She beat out Gladys Cooper for Valiant is the Word for Carrie, Carol Lombard, My Man Godfrey, Norma Shearer for Romeo and Juliet, although Norma Shearer was 34 and probably too old to play Juliet, but she was probably better than Louise Rainer in, the Great Ziegfeld.
Yeah. And then the second film, the very next year, we look at this and just are shocked. But
the very next year, it was The Good Earth, which, first of all, she should never have been cast as, the Chinese peasant girl Olan. I mean, we know now, we look back on it, I think now with a more evolved lens.
I hope so.
Yeah, but, back in those days, I mean, they were taking actresses like Myrna Loy and Barbara Stanwyck and Helen Hayes, and they were literally putting yellowface on them and having them play Asians, which now we know is just horrible.
Right.
Well, that's what they did with her, but the real tragedy was they had the perfect actress to play Olan in The Good Earth, and it was Anna May Wong, who was just the right age. She was an exquisite actress. She just would have been perfect, and she begged for the role. She wanted it so badly. She went to Louis B. Mayer and said, "This is it. This is the role I was meant to play," and he wouldn't give it to her.
Wow.
He just wouldn't. And the reason, some say, is because of the Hays laws, that she, as an Asian woman, couldn't kiss her co-star, Paul Muni, because he was white.
And
even though
he was playing an
was in
Asian
yellow
person
face,
as well,
playing
and
Asian
shouldn't
person.
have been.
Wow. Exactly, which to me is just so messed up.
Yeah.
So, it just really, and if you look at the people she beat that year, she beat, again, poor Irene Dunne, who ended up never winning an Oscar. He beat her
Which
for
is such a shame.
The Awful Truth, which in my opinion is probably one of the best female comedic performances ever committed to film. She beat Greta Garbo for Camille. She beat Janet Gaynor for the original A Star is Born. And here's the killer that just puts a slice down my heart is she beat Barbara Stanwyck for Stella Dallas.
Oh, Stella Dallas, another one of the films I remember watching as a young girl and thinking, who is that woman? And just the tragic image of her looking in the window. It just makes me want to cry.
Oh, I know.
She's so brilliant.
Yeah, to me that was Stanwyck's year, and she got robbed, and she never won a competitive one, but they did give her an honorary Oscar in '82.
I do remember that,
which was nice,
yeah.
But still,
yeah.
Louise Rainer.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh, wait, the best part. Let me just add a little coda here. The part that just makes me laugh is, how did Louise Rainer thank Hollywood for 2 Oscars? She literally said that Hollywood was this vapid, shallow place with little intellect, and she hightailed it to New York. So
right.
Thanks.
Did she take her 2 Oscars with her?
She did. I think it just is good for us now to look back on how far we've come since those horrible Hays codes were around. And, we've evolved so much as a race, as humanity, but we still have a long way to go. But it is nice to know that we've come a long way.
Amen. I agree. Hopefully we'll continue to move in the right direction.
Absolutely.
What's interesting is one of the other ones that you point out happens just a year later, 1939, often considered the greatest year in cinema history, film history. So, that was the year that Wizard of Oz came out, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Dark Victory, and this other little tiny film called Gone with the Wind.
Exactly.
May have heard of that. So tell us what happened.
Well, that was an interesting year because, Gone with the Wind was a phenomenon. There was never a bigger picture. It was so popular. It was
And the book
loved
had been out and people were waiting for the film, right?
Enormous. And they cast the perfect Scarlet and the perfect Rhett in Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable. And, when Oscar time rolled around, the buzz was phenomenal that it was going to be Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable, Best Actress, Best Actor, done.
No doubt, yeah.
Done. But, the only fly in the ointment for Clark Gable could have possibly been Jimmy Stewart, who was so good in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yes.
So that was the only thing to worry about. But earlier in the evening, there was an upset when Hattie McDaniel, historically and quite beautifully, in my opinion, beat Olivia de Havilland, her co-star, for Best Supporting Actress. So already there was a little, buzz in the air about that, like what's happening here. It's not the way we thought it was going to go.
Right.
And then when it came time for the, Best Actress, Vivien Leigh won hands down. But then they went to announce Best Actor, and by God, it was not Clark Gable. It was not Jimmy Stewart. It was Robert Donat for a little small film that wasn't on anyone's radar called Goodbye, Mr. Chips.
Yes. Another tearjerker, I will say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But no Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, I was going to say he was lovely and he was sweet and it was also told in, flashbacks, and he got to wear old age makeup and he got to be sweetly sentimental, but it just wasn't Rhett Butler.
No, it wasn't. Now, do you think that the vote was split? Again, do you think between Gable and Stewart, is that maybe why he kind of snuck through?
I think possibly so, because that's a phenomenon that happens in Hollywood. There's two frontrunners, and the Academy voters split their votes almost evenly between these two frontrunners. And then somebody in third or fourth place can just shoot up the middle and win, which happened in 1950 for Best Actress when Judy Holliday beat, and this still floors me, she beat Bette Davis for All About Eve. And this is the one that kills me, Gloria Swanson for Sunset Boulevard.
Yes. Two iconic performances.
Yes.
Yeah. And All About Eve being one of the great films of all time.
Oh, hands down. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's just, it happens.
I wonder what Betty thought of that. I'm assuming she was...
I'm sure she was not amused.
Yeah, she was probably not amused. Let's talk about, since we're kind of in this mode of knocking people out, you talk about a domino effect that can happen. And, someone one year doesn't get it and then they're nominated again and then they get it for a role that they're not right for. So what are the actresses or actors where you feel that happened unjustly?
Well, it's funny because it's all kind of connected, and it's almost like a little stone can make a big ripple effect, if done incorrectly. But the first example I think of is Ginger Rogers for Kitty Foyle. It was a lovely performance. It was soapy. It was a love triangle between this working class girl and a poor doctor played by James Craig, and then this married adventurer played by Dennis Morgan, who was her true love, but. Ultimately, she chose safe, and but she won the Oscar. Well, there were better performances that year. I think most cinephiles would admit that year should have been Joan Fontaine for Rebecca. One of the great performances.
Oh, she's wonderful.
And she was never better. And she's not one of my favorite actresses, but she was never better. She was so perfectly cast, and she was so primed to win that Oscar. And also, that same year, Kitty Foyle, which was light and fluffy in my opinion, beat out some heavy hitters, beat out Bette Davis for The Letter, beat out Martha Scott for Our Town, which was a phenomenal performance, beat out Katharine Hepburn for The Philadelphia Story.
Yes.
Philadelphia Story.
Yeah. And I know you talk about, and I would agree with you, that comedic performances are not often recognized, but that performance, looking back at it now, I don't think any actress can ever be in that play, because it started as a play on stage, and not be associated with, oh my gosh, that's Katharine Hepburn's line. You can't say it. It's just she made it, branded it her own.
That is a looming shadow to try to
It really is.
live in.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, the funny thing is about this particular year, which was 1940, when Ginger Rogers won, the very next year, I think the Academy said, oh, crap. We should have given it to Joan Fontaine. So what do? They give Joan Fontaine the Oscar the next year for Suspicion, which is a fine movie and a fine performance.
Yes.
But here's who she beat out, who should have won. Either Barbara Stanwyck for Ball of Fire or Bette Davis for The Little Foxes. Both of those performances, in my opinion, were better than Joan Fontaine. I think it was a, oops, we messed up, let's make it right Oscar.
Yes, let's give her what she should have had last year. But then that creates even more problems, right?
It does, because this is what, it goes back to the ripple effect we were talking about. Then that creates, to me, what I call the retribution Oscar. As I said, it should have gone to you last year, so we're going to give it to you this year, which messes it up for somebody else, and it just causes chaos. But I think the very first, what I call the retribution, oops, sorry award, probably went to Bette Davis in 1935 for Dangerous. She won the award, but I think they were really honoring her for the performance she did the prior year, which was one of her greatest performances. She played Mildred, the horrible waitress in Of Human Bondage. And there was such an outcry when she wasn't even nominated. There was a huge write-in campaign where they put in her name and tried to get her the Oscar, but it didn't work. So I think the next year, Retribution comes into play, and they give Bette Davis the Oscar for Dangerous. Not her best performance, not one we remember, not one we really think about that much. So, I think that's what happens when you get it wrong one year and you try to make up for it the next year. You still screw somebody.
You still do. And I think that also happens, too, with actors who are given Oscars not for a performance, but because they haven't gotten one. And so they get, I think of Paul Newman, a classic example. He should have won 4 times prior to that. And it wasn't that he gave a bad performance in Color of Money. It's just that there were so many other performances prior to that.
Without a doubt.
So I think it's time, Steve, for our Hollywood pop quiz.
Perfect. Well, the question today is, it's a two-parter. In what year did they introduce the Best Supporting Actor and Actress Academy Award, and who won them?
And no fair using Google. Okay, the answer at the end of today's episode.
And now, another stop on the Hollywood tour. Charlie Chaplin was an early regular at the iconic restaurant Musso and Frank shortly after it opened in the 1920s. Legend has it that Chaplin would challenge Douglas Fairbanks to a horse race down Hollywood Boulevard, which was still unpaved road, and the first person there would stick the other with the tab.
Okay, Steve, going back to the Retribution Oscar.
It's happened a couple of times where they've gotten it wrong and they've given someone an Oscar they probably didn't deserve, and then the very next year they give a performance that they absolutely should win, and they don't give it to them. I think they feel like, oh, you've already gotten yours, let's move on. And I think a great example of that is Gloria Graham.
Okay, and Gloria Graham, just for people who may not quite be able to place her, I always think of her as Ado Annie in Oklahoma.
Yes.
The original Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
And It's a Wonderful Life.
Violet.
And what's that?
The town floozy.
That line she says about, oh, this old dress, I just wear this one. I don't care what I have on. She's amazing.
She's an amazing actress. But the funny thing is, in 1952, she did The Bad and the Beautiful, extremely popular movie. Kirk Douglas, Lana Turner, big, glossy studio film, really promoted heavily. And she won the Best Supporting Actress award. She was on screen maybe 10 minutes.
Wow.
She did a really bad Southern accent. And
I just did.
But she was fine, but she won the Oscar. She shouldn't have. So the next year, which is crazy, she did one of the best film noirs ever, The Big Heat with Glenn Ford. There wasn't a performance better that year. She should have won the Oscar, wasn't even nominated. So I think they said, all right, sorry, Gloria, we gave you yours last year. This year, too bad. When the year she won Best Supporting Actress for The Bad and the Beautiful, Gene Hagen was robbed that year for Singing in the Rain. Absolutely should have won that Oscar.
That is a comedic performance that
of all times, yes. But again,
iconic.
like you said, they're just not prone to giving comedians Oscars,
Right.
which is too bad.
Dying is easy, comedy is hard.
Comedy is hard.
That's it.
Exactly.
Here's one that I am really puzzled by. And I know that she won the Juvenile Award for the Academy Award, which they don't give out anymore. But talk to me about Judy Garland not winning for A Star is Born.
Wow.
What a performance.
That was one of the greatest performances ever. And again, they chose to give the award to Grace Kelly for The Country Girl. And I think it was because we were so used to seeing Grace Kelly in these fluffy romantic comedies, and she was lovely and a really wonderful actress. But she took off the makeup and she wore Sears Roebuck clothes and she played this kind of dowdy woman. So they thought, wow, this is a real stretch for her.
Actress. Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they gave it to Grace Kelly. And I think it was a little bit of a popularity contest that year. Judy, as we know, had her troubles and wasn't everyone's favorite and was difficult to work with. But damn, she deserved that award.
Yeah. It makes me, this whole topic of conversation really makes me wonder in general about politics in terms of these awards. And nowadays, there's not a Louis B. Mayer, but there are all kinds of opportunities for studios to campaign, for actors to attend every single press junket or, event. We'll never know how much popularity
I think it goes
plays
back
into it.
It goes back to the, just being subjective.
Yes.
It's who knows why people vote the way they vote.
Yeah.
But we can still gripe about it.
Right. Well, and there's another actress that I think everybody has a very specific image of in their mind, and they don't necessarily think of her as a great actress, and that's Marilyn Monroe. And when she did Bus Stop, I had no idea that it was her own production company that produced it.
She, it's so funny. I don't think anyone knew how bright that woman really was. I mean, she was ambitious. I think everyone knew that, but she was really, really smart, and she was a great purveyor of her own image. She knew what sold, and she knew what she was good at, and she went along with it for a while. But I think at one point in her career, she just got fed up, and she basically walked down her contract at Fox. She went to New York, and she began studying with Lee Strasberg, and that's when I think she really became a real actress. And I think it shows in some of her later performances. River of No Return, she's amazing. Niagara, I mean, it just goes on and on. Don't Bother to Knock, one of her early films, which I think really showed her as a true actress. Mm-hmm. But she knew what she was doing, and I don't think people really knew that.
And so she was in the William Inge play Bus Stop, the film version of it. And was she never even nominated? Never
nominated. Yes, which is again, how could she never have been nominated?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's a shocker. And I think it was her image. They saw her as the sex symbol, and I don't think they equated sexy to talented.
Right.
Which was, very incorrect.
Very incorrect. There's also a situation where old Hollywood versus the new vanguard comes into play in terms of someone missing out on an Oscar. Can you talk about that?
Yes. There's a great example of that to me is The Graduate. One of the most groundbreaking, fresh, amazing movies of all time. 1967, of course, Dustin Hoffman, Anne Bancroft, Catherine Ross. It was just an amazing movie, and it really shepherded in, I think, a new age of movies. It really took people away from things that were more fantasy and into really real gritty situations, but with a lot of humor and a lot of irony and a lot of funny stuff. And Hoffman was so good. He was just iconic as Benjamin, the recent graduate who had no idea what he was going to do with his life until he falls into a romance with his dad and mother's friend, the older, sexy Mrs. Robinson.
Right.
And so, there was a great chance that year at the Oscars to award that movie.
Yes.
And it, it's funny because it won Best Director for Mike Nichols, but it didn't win anything else. And, instead of giving it to Dustin Hoffman, which would have been really wonderful, they went back to old school. They gave it to Rod Steiger for In the Heat of the Night. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a powerful performance, but not as cutting edge and fresh as the work that Dustin Hoffman did in The Graduate. And it may be the only chance they had to honor Steiger.
And Dustin Hoffman is young, and he's going to have more opportunities.
Yes.
And he did get more opportunities, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that his performance, I really see a shift in some ways in acting style even. That film wasn't the first shift, but it was part of that wave of, as you said, gritty, real performances that are very specific.
And then, on those same lines, you had Anne Bancroft give the performance of a lifetime. She'd won an Oscar already for The Miracle Worker, which she was phenomenal in. But then she brought Mrs. Robinson to life. I mean, we still talk about Mrs. Robinson.
And do you remember the age difference between Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft?
I think they were 7 years apart.
Yeah, it was really not very much.
Well, interestingly enough, they had originally cast Patricia Neal in the role.
Oh.
And she was all ready to go as Mrs. Robinson, and then she had her stroke.
Oh, no.
So she had to bow out, and then Anne Bancroft stepped in, and just... She was perfect.
She was perfect.
Let her perfect.
Patricia Neal would have been interesting.
Patricia Neal, I would have loved to have seen her do that.
But Anne Bancroft.
Well, and then of course, Anne Bancroft is nominated for an Oscar in '67, which was great. But again, they could have given this forward-thinking performance the Oscar, and Hollywood decided to award another old guard, wonderful Katharine Hepburn for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. An incredible performance, a lovely sentimental performance, but nothing as cutting edge and fresh as what Anne Bancroft did as Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if there was some sentimentality attached to it because of Spencer Tracy dying shortly after the film was finished.
I think absolutely. I think that's part of it for sure. On another note, Catherine Ross was amazing as Elaine, the love interest of Dustin Hoffman, and of course the daughter of Mrs. Robinson. She was fresh, she was new, she was exciting. She was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, and then they gave it to Estelle Parsons for Bonnie and Clyde. And she's great, but to me, she was just so annoying. There was just something about her performance that just was like nails on a chalkboard to me.
Didn't somebody shoot her in the head in that movie anyway? So maybe that's
somebody should have. They did. I think they shot her in the eye or something.
I think she did get shot in the eye, yeah.
I mean, not to take anything away from her. She's great.
She is. She's
great. I don't know. I would have given it to Catherine Ross. Yeah. That's just me.
I did get to see Miss Parsons in August Osage County on Broadway. And
how was that?
She was phenomenal.
Wow.
Yeah. She had just replaced the actress who originated the role, and she was terrific.
Wow.
But I'm with you.
Yeah.
I totally get this.
Isn't it kind of cool that we grew up in an era where we were like the bridge between current Hollywood and old Hollywood? We were around enough when enough of them were around that we got to see them in plays, and we got to, meet them sometimes.
Yes.
I always call our generation, we're the bridge gap people that really bridge old Hollywood with new Hollywood.
Right. And hopefully can continue to give the message that you need to go back and look at these films. I mean, students that I've had in acting class don't know who people are.
Yeah.
They didn't even know who Carol Burnett was. I couldn't believe that.
You're kidding. You're kidding me.
That was tragic.
Yeah.
Can I share a couple of mine?
I was just going to ask you.
I would love to get your take on.
I would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay. The two that popped into my mind. One is kind of a domino effect, ripple effect. In 1983, Jessica Lange was nominated for Frances for leading actress, and Meryl Streep was nominated for Sophie's Choice. And I loves me some Meryl Streep. I would never take away any Oscar. I think she should have probably won more than she has. And I think they've held back on her. So she should have won for Sophie's Choice. But I also thought Jessica Lange was exquisite in Frances, so vulnerable, so raw. She was also nominated for Best Supporting Actress for Tootsie. It was a very good performance.
What evs? What evs on that?
What evs? She won because she couldn't win for Frances because everybody was going to vote for her.
It's funny on those same lines. I'm just going to jump on this for a second, but there's been several instances where people have been nominated for a lead and a supporting Oscar, and they usually win one or the other. But the chain was broken and I forget the year right off the cuff, but when Sigourney Weaver was nominated for Gorillas in the Mist, and then also for supporting actress for Working Girl, she didn't win either. And the funny thing is she said in an interview later that she turned to her husband at that moment and she said, "Well, I just made Oscar history."
Oh my gosh. And she's right.
And she's right. She's the first one not to win either.
And both of those performances were
Great.
Terrific.
And she's never won one.
And she's never won.
Yeah.
Hopefully she has an opportunity. My other issue with Oscar happened in 2019, and my husband will testify that when this person did not win, I sobbed. I broke down and sobbed.
Wow.
And it was, I thought, one of the finest film performances ever. It was Glenn Close in The Wife. And when you look at what film acting really is, and the actress that she is, I just get goosebumps even talking about her. She should have won. She should have won. She should have won. Now, Olivia Colman did win. And that was
whatevs.
Yeah, whatevs. I mean, she's a great actress.
She's a great actress.
And she's given, many other performances.
Yes.
But for me, how could you deny Glenn Close?
I know. Well,
who's in her 70s.
I'm going to go back a generation or a few decades. I think she should have won for Fatal Attraction.
Oh.
I think that performance was so complicated and nuanced and amazing. And Cher was great in Moonstruck, but come on, it's Glenn. We're still talking about Glenn Close and Fatal Attraction.
Yes.
We're not talking about Cher and Moonstruck anymore.
Right, yeah. And Glenn Close is truly one of the great actresses of this generation.
Who still never won an Oscar.
If she doesn't win one, I want to write something that she could do.
I know. She's so overdue.
Yeah,
overdue.
She really, really is. I think we've given our opinions of where we think.
Absolutely. And as we said, everybody has an opinion. These are ours.
So, Steve, what is the answer to our Hollywood pop question?
For our inaugural Hollywood pop quiz, the answer is the year was 1936. It's the first year they introduced the Best Supporting Actor and Actress Oscars, and they went to Gail Sondergaard for Antony Adverse and good old Walter Brennan for Come and Get It, which coincidentally starred Frances Farmer.
Wow. And wasn't Gail Sondergaard going to be the original Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz?
Absolutely. She was originally cast, and they decided they wanted a more traditional witch, and because they had this whole concept of her being a sexy, sequined, Vogue-like witch, and it just didn't work. So then they scratched that idea, they let her go, and they brought in Margaret Hamilton to play the old, ugly, traditional witch.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Well, this has been so much fun talking about the Oscars, but there is so much of old Hollywood and the movies that we have left to cover. So
we have lots to say.
We do. So thanks for listening today, and we look forward to you tuning in to episode 2.
If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us at info@frombeneaththehollywoodsign.com.
Wonderful. So that's this week's view
from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebly. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebly and Toth. Copyright 2023, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.